Well, welcome to the 700 Club. A Chinese spy station in Cuba is now setting off alarm bells. Less than 100 miles off the coast of the United States, this base is being developed into a military training facility.
And the Chinese are not only shoring up the military on the island, they're also propping up the Cuban economy, all of which should be a huge wake-up call for the U.S. Dale Hurd reports.
This is the Chinese Signals Intelligence Facility at Bejucal, Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. mainland. It allows China to monitor U.S. military communications throughout the southern United States. When its existence was first reported last month, the Pentagon denied it.
We are not aware of China and Cuba developing any type of spy station.
Later, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby evaded, but admitted the base exists.
We're not going to be able to get into too much detail about our own counterintelligence efforts.
And we now know that the spy station isn't new. A former intelligence official told the Miami Herald it's been there since the 1990s, and the U.S. government has known about it. Now there are reports the Chinese plan to expand the spy base into a military training facility. What form it will take is unclear. But consider this base China built on Mischief Reef in the South China Sea. It includes a landing strip, hangars, and a listening post. Cuba is a much easier place to install a military base. But Dr. Evan Ellis, the Latin American specialist at the U.S. Army War College Strategic Studies Institute, says the site at Bejucal is too close to the United States to be useful in any armed conflict because it would be easy to destroy.
The closeness of Cuba to the United States means that its value for PLA Navy forces is probably pretty low because, again, that would be very, very vulnerable being that close to the United States.
But this is about more than just a military base. China is helping keep a desperate Cuban government afloat. With Cuba facing its biggest economic and political crisis in decades, China has thrown it a lifeline, giving it millions in cash and restructuring its debt.
Cuba is short fuel, it's short medicine, it's short food. Cuba has been facing an economic crisis, but in the past 2 to 3 years, especially since COVID, that crisis has deepened to unprecedented proportions. And China, who's willing to say, we'll bankroll you as long as we get paid.
This is the playbook China has used throughout Latin America to replace the U.S. as the leading trading partner in the region and make nations dependent upon it. Retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert says the U.S. is too disengaged in Latin America, including Cuba.
This is a neighbor of ours, 90 miles or so to the south of Key West, and I think we need to start engaging in a real way economically and diplomatically with them. And I think that would take away some of that enticement that China can swoop in and fill the vacuum that we should have filled long ago.
China in the past was careful not to provoke the United States by basing troops in Latin America. But with the planned base in Cuba, Ellis says that may be changing.
So this is crossing a threshold, and clearly the fact that they've chosen to cross the threshold at a time when tensions are increasing over Taiwan and other issues, indicates that there's a willingness to take risks. They're not as worried as they used to be about provoking the United States.
In October 1962, the installation of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The U.S. government stood up to the Soviets and the missiles were removed. But with the Biden administration seeking better relations with the Chinese government, there would seem to be little chance the White House will stand up to this. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, I agree there'll be little chance that we stand up to it, and the reason is that we're bought and paid for. When you look at how many U.S. businesses are absolutely dependent on China for either supply chain or for other financing, no, there's just no way that the Biden administration will stand up to it. China is being very strategic. On one level, you admire them for their strategy going forward. They're building harbor facilities in nations around the world. And through those facilities, they're gaining incredible intelligence about the economy of all of those countries. Then they're coming in with trade deals, and they're trying to make them dependent on the Chinese economy going forward for the supply of raw materials for an industrial society. In the U.S., we don't make pharmaceuticals anymore. They're all made in China. We don't make microchips anymore. Again, they're all made in China. They're being very strategic because they view this as the Chinese century. They are optimistic about their future. The fundamental problem for us in America, are we optimistic about the future of our own country? Are we optimistic about the future of Western civilization? Can we restore that optimism? Can we get to a point where, no, this is the American century. We're not over yet. Well, in other news, as NATO leaders gather in Lithuania, President Biden says it's not the right time to bring Ukraine into the coalition. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. The alliance is pledging to stand with Ukraine against the Russian invasion. But NATO's leader and President Biden agree it's too early to allow Ukraine into the group.
I don't think there is unanimity in NATO about whether or not to bring Ukraine into the NATO family now.
Reuters reports Ukraine's President Zelensky has been pushing for an invitation to join after the war ends. Meanwhile, Turkey and Hungary are throwing up a roadblock to Sweden becoming part of the alliance. Turkey's President Erdogan said today that if the European Union will allow his country to join the EU, then he will, quote, pave the way for Sweden to join NATO. Well, here at home, millions of Americans are in danger from extreme weather. In the Northeast, flash floods overwhelmed parts of New York. Rising waters from nearly 8 inches of rain washed out roads and threatened people in their homes. One woman died when she was swept away by the swift waters. In other parts of the country, intense heat is the danger. In Texas and the Southeast, the heat index making it feel like triple digits. The Southwest is going into a second week of temperatures of 110 degrees and higher. Phoenix expected to hit 115 in the coming days. Well, a baptism of biblical proportions took place in Southern California this weekend. Thousands lined up Saturday at Pirates Cove in Corona del Mar. That's the same beach shown in the movie Jesus Revolution, where evangelist Lonnie Frisbee baptized new converts. As CBN's Wendy Griffith reports, Pastor Greg Laurie believes the film is bringing a new wave of revival to America.
Inspired by the movie Jesus Revolution, thousands of people came from all across America and the world to take part in a Jesus Revolution baptism at the now famous Pirates Cove. Pastor Greg Laurie, whose story is featured in the film and was baptized here himself 50 years ago, couldn't believe the size of Saturday's crowd.
We have around 4,000 people signed up to be baptized today. Can you believe that?
Thousands of people lined the seawall at the iconic Pirates Cove to wait their turn, as Pastor Laurie explained to the crowd what baptism really means.
Because you're saying goodbye to the old you, buried with Christ in baptism, so you might walk in newness of life. That's what the Bible says. So you're coming out saying, I'm making this commitment, and you're doing it publicly in front of friends and family.
Shelley came from Arizona with her 3 nieces to be baptized for the first time.
I saw the movie at first, and then I realized that we all needed to get baptized.
How do you feel?
I feel wonderful. It's a new life.
Newport Beach Mayor Pro Tem Will O'Neill called what's happening here incredible.
Not only are they baptizing people, but they're really bringing a community together. And look, we spend a lot of time thinking about water quality here in Newport Beach, but nothing is more pure than what's happening right now. And it's just a special thing to see today.
Pastor Laurie says he's thrilled to see the impact that the movie Jesus Revolution is having on a new generation. He's urging Christians to keep praying for revival so that what's happening in Pirates Cove will spread across the nation. Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Well, as the Bible says, the angels are rejoicing in heaven. Now for some news close to home. The Regent University Board of Trustees has named Gordon Robertson the school's new chancellor. Gordon succeeds his father, Dr. Pat Robertson, who founded the university back in 1977 and served as chancellor until he went to be with the Lord back in June. In that time, Regent grew to become one of America's premier Christian universities with 13,000 students on campus and online. Phil Walker, chairman of the Regent Board of Trustees, said the board is thrilled at Gordon's appointment, writing in a statement, quote, "He is uniquely equipped to carry on the mission and vision of Regent and the legacy of his father." And Gordon, I saw in your memo that you have a strong desire to foster greater unity between Regent and CBN.
That's exactly the point. Let's bring all of these wonderful organizations together, because I think a threefold cord is not easily broken. When you can combine Operation Blessing, CBN 700 Club, and Regent University together, you have a force that can bring Christian leadership to the world. And that's exactly what Regent University is dedicated to do. It's for the glory of God. When we look back at the history of Regent, you have to look at the founding. The founding happened very humbly. It was in a hotel breakfast bar out in California, where my father, who was always on some kind of diet, was eating cottage cheese and cantaloupe. He somehow thought that would enable him to lose weight. So he bowed his head and prayed, and God spoke to him and said, "Build me a university for my glory." And that was the beginning. Very humble beginning. They were in a double-wide trailer in Chesapeake, Virginia. And that was the beginning, and it's grown tremendously, because whatever God plants, he increases. So when we look at the increase and we look at the legacy of it, thank God. And thank God for how he has preserved me and brought me to this season in order to honor him. Amen. May everything we do be for the glory of God. Ad gloriam Dei is a wonderful Latin phrase. It means for the glory of God. Let everything that we do be for his glory.